So, Anders, you can do the lights. Thanks. I think everybody's here. You've seen this before if you haven't memorized it yet. I'll give you lots more opportunities. But you can see here the wide varieties of peoples who were in these areas, all the way from the Mediterranean into East Asia, China, and so what I'm going to try to do today is to talk about some of the major groups that had an influence on the Silk Road, and particularly the key traders. That is, these were mostly people in the Middle Lands where they acted as the intermediaries between the traders coming from the east and from the west. I want to go back because I want to start today with the steppe peoples. I showed this last week, and this is a map that shows the steppes as they extend from Far East Asia into what is now Central Europe, Ukraine, Hungary, Romania, and so on. I won't belabor that point. Here's what the steppes look like with the mountains in the background. The steppes, as you can tell, are not the mountains. The steppes are in the front where the camels are grazing. This is a couple of other shots of the steppes. And then in the right-hand picture, the typical dwelling of the steppe nomads, and still today in places like Kazakhstan. You'll notice, however, that this is a little up to date since there's a pickup truck parked outside of one of the yurts. But everywhere you go in Central Asia, you see these yurts. These are called yurts or gurs in Mongolian, and a lot of people think that they're having a great cultural experience by staying in a yurt and drinking kumis, which is fermented milk, mare's milk. I didn't either. So I've alluded to this before, but today we're going to begin by looking at the steppe dwellers because they played a couple of major roles. One was that they were intermediaries, the other was that they tended to try to displace some of the more settled populations, and a lot of the battles that we see come from peoples from the steppes coming down into the more settled areas. There are a lot of terms that are used for the steppe dwellers. Scythians is used in the west. Scythian people, particularly in the areas, say for example, are in Ukraine, a number of major Scythian burials there and spread throughout Central and particularly Eastern Europe, at eastern end of the steppes. The Xiongnu in China, who were major opponents, if you will, of the settled Han Chinese. The terms became widely used for all nomads to some degree as opposed to specific ethnic groups. Until the appearance of writing in the steppes, everything we know about the steppes people came from the accounts of nomadic life that were produced by the sedentary neighbors. Well, you probably are aware of the fact that most people who write about somebody else don't always put them in a good light, and that's true here. They were not always, and perhaps never exclusively, nomadic, but they're characterized by nomadism, and the nomadic pastoralist component of the society really increased over time as they became more adept horse riders. And they were able to cover large areas and stray further from their homestead, which might have been a group of yurts that was located in a central area. Probably from a historical point of view, the most defining characteristic of the steppe people was the fact that they were very skilled archers and skilled in mounted archery, and their formidable weapon was what's called the compound or composite bow. And a composite bow, I'll come back to that in just a minute. they had, basically they grew up on horseback. So they had amazing ability to ride horses, to ride full charge, and they also had the ability to turn around and shoot backwards, shoot over the tail of the horse, what's called the Parthian shot. And you'll see a lot of these illustrated in some of the artworks and sculptures in the Middle East. So this slide points out that the steppe nomads really developed three things that changed warfare. First of all, the compound bow. The compound bow was made from horn, sinew, and wood. Had a long range. It was very effective. This is in contrast to the long bow that you think about when you think about Robin Hood and so on. This is 3 feet, 4 feet long at most, and because of the way it was constructed, was very powerful in its ability to fire arrows with a great deal of force. The second thing that happened was that they invented stirrups. So they rode with saddles and they invented stirrups, and it was the presence of the stirrups that enabled them to turn around and fire backwards, that Parthian shot that I talked about. And then the third thing was the development of spoke wheel chariots. It's not very efficient to conduct warfare off of a box cart with wooden wheels, but with the spoke wheel chariot, the chariots became smaller, lighter, and much more maneuverable. And basically, the chariot usually would have 2 people on it, perhaps 3. One was the person who was steering the chariot, the other was an archer. And that completely changed the warfare. And there's a lot of discussion, some very interesting books on the relationship between the chariot, language, and the abilities of these people to cover large areas of territory. So the pastoral nomads, it's important to understand how they lived and also the ecology of pastoral nomadism. Most of the evidence, I said some of it comes from the settled peoples who were their enemies, but a lot of it comes from travelers who moved and traveled extensively in that area. They did not have advanced technologies. They were able to manufacture stirrups and things like that, but they really didn't have the kinds of technologies that you found in the settled areas. And so they liked things like vases, like jewelry and brooches and so on. And they incorporated the motifs into the things that they produced and vice versa. And so you see the spread of ideas from the settled into the steppes, and again, as I say, vice versa. So the first nomadic people I want to talk about are the Xiongnu. You can see the area of the Xiongnu there. This is in what is now central and eastern China. And you can see that they were kind of superimposed above the Han Empire, which was the predominant Chinese civilization. And the argument has been made, somebody pointed out the other day, Tom, you're blocking the door. Betty Ann would like to comment on that. The argument was made that perhaps the Great Wall initially was built to keep the Xiongnu out from moving in from the steppes into the cities. The Xiongnu was really a confederation of tribes, a confederation of nomadic people who lived on the eastern Asian steppe, centered in Mongolia, centered in Mongolia, and included parts of what's now Siberia, the Gansu corridor in western China, and Xinjiang, which is this large area of Western China. We talked about the Turpan Basin, Kashgar last week when we were talking about cities. They were basically herders, and most of all, originally they were all nomads, lived in tents. By the 1st century CE, there were some settled populations, and these then combined livestock raising, that is the tradition of the steppe, along with growing cereal grains. This was in the area of what's now North China, where millet, barley, and wheat were the predominant, and continue to be actually the predominant starches. According to some of the ancient Chinese texts, they did not have writing, and according to some of the ancient Chinese texts, they had been in the steppe since the 3rd century BCE. They had very, as I alluded to earlier, very complicated relationships with the Chinese dynasties, characterized by periods of hostility and conflicts, and then characterized by periods of relatively warm relationships, if you will, with beneficial trade and intermarriages with people from the Zhongyu into China. They became a predominant power in the 2nd century BCE, and their empire, the major empire, lasted until the late 1st century CE. And the Han Chinese expanded, and the Zhongyu were ultimately defeated. Question is whether or not the Zhongyu people were the ancestors of the Huns of the European Turks. The Huns moved east from Central Asia, from Mongolia, from the north of the steppe areas, as did the Turks. But it's not clear whether they came from Zhongyu or other people of the steppe regions. Well, if we begin to look at the more settled populations, at the height of the Silk Road, there were 4 major powers. The Eastern Roman Empire, the Byzantium, the Parthians, which were the Eastern Persian peoples, the Kushans, which were more in Afghanistan and up into Central Asia, and then finally China. So there were a lot of players, but these were the major groups involved. So back to here, Byzantium, the Kushans, the Parthians here, and then all of the various Chinese dynasties and empires here. If we begin to the west and look at the Byzantine Empire, you can see that at its height, it included a very large area, basically encompassing all of the Mediterranean basin. It was centered in Anatolia, and you can see that the major areas were there in the northern Mediterranean and then into Asia Minor. The capital of the Eastern Roman Empire was Byzantium. It was dedicated in 330 current CE, and it was important with all trade to the east, down to its conquest by the Ottoman Turks in 1453. Under the rule of Justinian, in the 6th century CE, the territory was at its greatest extent, as you can see from the map, and basically controlled most of the Mediterranean world. Key issues revolved around wars with Sasanian Persia, and once these wars took place, Sasanian Persians were basically what is now Iran in the larger area to the east of that. But during these periods of conflict, basically the primary routes of the Silk Road were cut off, and it became necessary to take a different route, and they moved to the north through the Black Sea and through the Caucasus. And so that's why if you will read about the influence of the Silk Road on countries like Georgia, Armenia, and so on. Well, it's really in this latter period during the time that the Persians, Sasanians, and the Byzantines were fighting. We'll talk later about the importance of silk, but it points out here that in estimated 553, the Byzantines had learned the secrets of silk production, and then silk manufacture and silk dyeing became important imperial monopolies controlled by the Byzantine government. And this led to major changes in the movement of silk across the area. Well, let's talk about one of the great leaders in this early period. I pointed out that I'm going to close by talking about two later ones, but Alexander the Great had a tremendous influence on the development of cultures in the Silk Road areas and in the development of trade. He was a Macedonian. His father was Philip II of Macedon. The Greeks claimed him to be Greek, but really he wasn't. He was a Macedonian. And at that time, the Greeks and the Macedonians really didn't like each other very much. He conquered Egypt, he conquered the Middle East, conquered Persia, and captured most of the major cities along the caravan routes. So he took control of what were large areas of the Silk Road. The people that he conquered were basically a litany of the indigenous groups in the Anatolian and Persian regions, and he brought this Macedonian/Greek influence throughout the areas that he conquered. And you see that there's relatively secure territories that he established where Greek control was maintained, and the influence of Greek culture became very important. It was called the Hellenistic Empire. In 328 BCE, Alexander was in the highlands of what is now Afghanistan, in Bactria. And if you recall, when we talked about the areas, Bactria is an area which is now southern Uzbekistan, northern Afghanistan, and then through Samarkand all the way to Bukhara, and then he took his famous lady Roxana, a Bactrian princess, as his bride, and then established his capital in Bactria or Balkh as the eastern capital of his empire. He did a great job of naming places after himself. And so we find Alexandria all the way from Turkmenistan and Tajikistan to Egypt, and we can attribute that to his success as a conqueror and a ruler. So Some of the peoples that Alexander conquered were the Persians, and the Persian Empire then disintegrated from a larger empire into the Parthians, and this new Parthian Empire was established, which we'll talk about in just a second. In the 3rd century, the Parthians were weakened, and the Persians revived their old empire. And once they did this, they expanded their territory through Bactria and on to Samarkand, and the Kushans, who were the indigenous people there, were defeated by the Persians. And so this Persian influence, which we now think of Persia as Iran, but it was really much more broadly spread. It went all the way from basically the Mediterranean through Central Asia and up to China. And these people were people who would be basically included in the category Persian, had a monopoly over trade on the Silk Road. And one of the key people there were the Sagians, that we'll talk about in a minute. Well, this is the Seleucid Empire. This is one of the major Persian empires, and you can see how broadly it extended. Here you can see Parthia there in the orange. They kind of got pushed up here, and we'll see in a minute that they were actually much larger here. This is the Bactrian. This is where Alexander established this Greek civilization in what is now Afghanistan and Central Asia. But a very large empire extending from here. We talked about Antioch last week, which is right here, Palmyra here, all the way up into here. So a very large and successful empire. So they basically controlled the western half of the Silk Road beginning about 300 BCE. It included Afghanistan, Bactria, Persia, Mesopotamia, Armenia, Syria, and parts of Anatolia. So as you saw on the map, it's very large. They built the city of Antioch. I pointed out last week the importance of that city, and it, in some people's eyes, became the western end of the Silk Road. Throughout this area, Greek art and culture were very important, and later influenced Buddhist art, Buddhist artistic styles, which then had Indo-Greek styles that were represented in both art and architecture across Asia. So this Greek influence grew not only from after the time of Alexander, but grew also with the Seleucid Empire. Another group of people who would be considered in this broad Persian category are traders of what was called the Kushan Empire. And these traders moved back and forth with caravans, but they were key middlemen. The Sogdians is one we'll talk more about in a minute. They sent embassies to the Tang Dynasty in the 5th and 6th century CE, and they became a dominant force again in the Silk Road in the early 7th century with the decline of Parthia. Parthia had been sitting there and had been these key middlemen. They reclaimed Armenia, and then they sacked the major Syrian cities of Antioch, Damascus, and Jerusalem. All of the cities basically were taken back by the Persians. There was a key battle at a city called Ctesiphon, a major city on the Silk Road, and this occurred in 363 CE. And this led to the defeated Persians, and this really was contributed to the rise of the importance of Byzantium. With the rise of Islam in the 7th century, many people from Persia fled eastward. Rather than be converted to Islam, they were mostly Zoroastrians, as we'll see when we talk about religions. They fled to eastward into Sogdiana. Sogdiana is that area around what is now centered on Samarkand. We'll see that in just a minute. And the Silk Road then became a highway for refugees, moving from areas captured by the Arabs, moving in with Islam, and then moving to the east. This is the Parthian Empire at its greatest extent, and you can see how it has this wide swath through from the Mediterranean through what is now Persia and into Central Asia and into Afghanistan, what is now Afghanistan. The Parthians were key middlemen, one of the major middlemen groups in controlling the trade that was occurring between Rome and China during the last couple of centuries BCE and then continuing onward. They basically, at their peak, held a monopoly on the movement of goods east to west. And the Parthian caravans were threading their way through the Iranian uplands and down into Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is an old word for what is now basically Iraq, the land between the rivers. The Parthians were also guides, so that if you had troops or peoples with caravans moving from east to west, the Parthians served as their guides as well as middlemen. Interestingly, the Parthians had a tradition of circulating inventory or itineraries, one of which, a document called Parthian Station, survives. And these itineraries included things such as what the main stations were, or where the caravanserais were, where they might find shelter, the distances between these sites, or between the caravanserais, and then the notable sites along the way. So it was really a travel guide for merchants on the Silk Road traveling through their area. I have referred to the Kushans. Here's the Kushan Empire at its height here. Here's the Himalayas. Here's Kashgar. Here's Bactria over here. This is the Ganda Valley, which is now in far eastern Uzbekistan, and the Sogdians are up here. So these folks played a key role in the routes that were coming this way, but particularly in the routes coming from the main Silk Road down into India and South Asia. In the 2nd century CE, the empire extended from Afghanistan into Central Asia. They are thought to be originally nomads who came from Central Asia, who had been driven westward, and then they conquered the remains of the Greek cities of Bactria, and then expanded into India. So they came from the northeast down into this area, and down on into the northern parts of what is now India and Pakistan. They were predominantly an urban country or urban culture. They produced a lot of art, and I've referred to Gandharan art. This was at its highest during the Kushan period. And again, kind of back to this interaction or interplay between cultures. This Gandharan art, as I've said before, combined features of Greco-Roman art with what we saw in India. But here, among the Kushans, they maintained some of their nomadic paths, so that they weren't all settled people, but they maintained some nomadism. Well, during the Kushan period between the 1st and the 3rd century CE, the economic, religious, and cultural contact between South Asia and Central Asia grew, and they were right in the middle of this, placed at the north end, or if you will, South Asia and the south end of Central Asia. There was a very well-known leader called Kanishka, and his legacy as a major leader of these intermediate folks, these Kushans, preserved in a lot of inscriptions and monuments, textual traditions, and in coins. And we have coinage here in which the leaders were represented. Their influence extended as far as the Tarim Basin, up into the oasis cities along the southern end of the Tarim Basin, Khotan, and then actually in Kashgar, which is further east of the Tarim Basin, or further west, sorry. This is a time period when Buddhists were moving and expanding the cave art of Central Asia, of Central India, which then spread into Central Asia and on to China over the next several centuries. And I mentioned last week the city of Yunnan, which was kind of the center of the transmission of art from India into China. There are coins that are bilingual, that is Chinese Inquistari, which is a Persian or a Pakistani script, issued in Khotan. That's the city is at the edge, the south edge of the Taklamakan on that southern route, and that provides evidence for commerce between the Kushan Empire and the Tarim Basin. The question came up about how last week, how did they pay for things, and there was coinage that was both local and or more broadly spread. The Kushans really established themselves as a major force in the Silk Road, and for over 5 centuries, the Tarim Basin would be under the strong Buddhist influence again. We were responsible for much of the early movement of the Buddhist religion from South Asia and into Central Asia. I talked about the Sogdians. They were key middlemen. And again, to orient you, this is their key area right in here. Here's Samarkand, Tashkent, which is the capital of Uzbekistan. Bukhara, that we talked about before. Merv, which is here. This is Parthian. And this is Hindu come down here. This is the Sasanian Empire extending over here, and this is where the Sogdians are. In this, the caption is about 640 CE. It was an ancient Arabian civilization. The languages are derived from Persian. And located predominantly between the Nagara and the Sirdar rivers, which is now Uzbekistan. This was basically the point where the East and West and South Asia collided, and the center of several Silk Road routes. Between about the 5th and the 8th century CE, this was the golden age. The golden age of the Sogdians. they never maintained a large integrated empire. They were basically a group of small principalities, each with its own leader, what would be referred to later as a Khan. They were major traders. They were subjects of the Kushan Empire, but as I say, they tended to be more independent. They were really specialized caravaneers, leading caravans between the Pamirs and the Tarim Basin. Their language, Sogdian, became really the lingua franca on the eastern half of the Silk Road. They had close ties with the Persians with respect to language and culture and ethnicity. They had an alphabet, and that was derived from Western Asia. And they established important trading colonies on the borders of China, perhaps, especially near Lap Nor, which Lap Nor, as I pointed out the other day, is now in the, certainly not the heart of the Taklamakan Desert, but certainly well into it. And they had a colony there that was a Chinese garrison city, so they were providing goods and services to the Chinese military. They sent envoys to Xi'an and developed very strong diplomatic relationships between the peoples of East China, and they had permanent residents there. They took charge of trade from Shannon or Yunnan westward, and they would lead great caravans of hundreds of camels. There were caravanserais in the Pamir Mountains or in cities and plains, and then this is where goods would be relayed between one carrier and another, for example, to the Kushans or the Bactrians, with the Sogdians playing this key central role. They established vineyards along the northern edge of the Tarim Basin, and they brought systems of interesting system of agricultural irrigation, what are cars from Persia, and grew melons, peaches, fruits of all kinds. The area around Turpan now is famous for its raisins, and when I do my talks about the current travels, I'll talk about the Turpan and raisin production. Great melons grow in this area. Since this was the center point, a lot of different cultures and societies left their mark on the Sogdians, and so it's really a blend of cultures, religion, and they maintain this connectedness with all these areas because they were good businessmen, they were good middlemen. They were flexible, they were mobile, and they were able to adapt to their circumstances. More than just transporting market goods, as we pointed out, I think in the first lecture, there were lots of other things besides market goods that were transported, arts, religious ideas, technologies that really had an impact on societies a long way from the Sogdian homeland. As I said, they were middlemen, they were transmitters, they were facilitators, and they were not a military or a strong military presence. They were really more merchants and basically trying to get their business done. Their modus operandi, as the slide points out, was really trading rather than conquering. And the urban areas in Sogdiana grew around water supplies, and then we pointed out last week the importance of water and establishment of cities. And they had markets established in the oasis towns. And these markets were oftentimes stocked with luxury goods from both east and west. Two major Sogdian cities were Samarkand and Bukhara, and we'll talk about them when I do my talk on traveling on the Silk Road. But those were two of their major cities. Well, in the 7th and 8th century, Muslims, Arabs, moved eastward from Arabia, and this basically led to the collapse of local rule, and Sogdiana became Muslim, and the territory was included in successive Muslim empires. It didn't have a strong and centralized state, and that may be one of the things that led to its downfall, because it didn't have the way to marshal resources to respond to the military threat that came with the spread of Islam. And so basically, after the 8th century invasions, the local rulers became vassals of the Arabs. Well, the Khazars, we won't talk that much about them, but they were important in looking at the area north of the Caspian and the Black Seas. And this area became important, as I pointed out before, when there was fighting between the Persians and the Byzantines, sorry, senior moment there. When those southern trade routes got closed down, this became a particularly important route. The Khazars, again, where they came from, nobody knows, but they probably came from Central Asia, and their empire controlled those important parts of the Caucasus and along the Caspian Sea. And the basis of the empire was trade based on that northern Silk Road. And the caravans traveled around the Caspian towards the Oxus River to a region that became known as Khwarazm. From there, Sogdiana and other Central Asian caravaneers handled the trade eastward towards China. So this was kind of they were the middlemen of the northwestern end of the Silk Road. They provided assistance to the Eastern Roman Empire in attacking Mesopotamia and reestablishing trade routes there. They helped to bring the downfall of Justinian, control of Byzantium after his death, and then, like the Sogdians to the east, they were defeated by the Muslims when they came into that area in the 730s. Finally, looking at the far eastern end, the peoples that we are interested in, we get to China, and particularly the Tang Dynasty, which was the key Chinese dynasty at the height of the Silk Road. And you can see Xi'an here, Dunhuang here, and the extent of the Tang Dynasty territories around the Tarim Basin. They basically created a unified China, a strong central government, and very effective and efficient communication. They were the dominant force in China, East Asia, and probably one of the most brilliant epics of Chinese history. Taizong became emperor in 626 and ruled till his death in 649, and this was really the early heyday of the empire. The territory around the oasis settlements of the Gobi, which was north of the Taklamakan, and his sphere of influence continued all the way into Xinjiang, as you could have seen in the previous slide. They overcame the Western Turks in 640 and established what they call the four garrisons, Kashgar, Gushar, Kashgar, and Khotan. Those are cities on the north and the east, or sorry, west of the Tarim Basin. The northwest tribes, the Xinyu and others in the northwest of Central Asia, sent envoys to the Tang court, asked for the emperor's protection, and basically subsequently China became the protector of all the small states in Central Asia. They were strong promoters of international trade and encouraged it by improving the trade routes between Persia and India as well as into China. In 643, an envoy was sent to the Buddhist king of India and established as well a direct contact with the Byzantine Empire. There was a very famous Buddhist monk, Zhang, who established contacts for the Tang dynasty during his travels in India and Nepal and Tibet. We'll talk about him extensively when we talk about some of the travelers. This was a period of major economic and political growth, and this was fueled by migration to China along the Silk Road, especially to Xi'an, which became one of the largest and wealthiest cities in the world. The Xi'an appealed to merchants, artisans, as well as religious missionaries. And it was a very cosmopolitan city, and people came from all over the areas of the Eastern Silk Road into Xi'an. It was open to foreign cultures, and there were established foreign colonies in Xi'an and other parts of China. They welcomed the Persian princes who were fleeing from the west. They were being chased out by the Arabs to some extent. In Xi'an, tomb sculptures and Buddhist paintings provide a lot of evidence of how the East and West came together and was popular among the Chinese elite. However, with the decline in the power of the Tang dynasty, they had to rely on foreign military aid from groups such as nomadic Uyghurs. And the Uyghurs were key nomads in the eastern part of the far west of what is now China, Xinjiang. So I'll talk briefly about two of the leaders that had a major impact on the later history of the Silk Road. The first of these is Genghis Khan, who was the leader of the Mongols. His main camp, his capital, was Karakorum, which is on the steppes in Mongolia. He was born Temujin and then named the Great Khan in 1196. And he became the all-conquering ruler of the peoples of Mongolia. The term Genghis Khan simply means great Khan. We've got pictures of him. That's what he looked like. And this shows the extent of the Mongol Empire. It was the largest single-mass empire ever in history. The British Empire was bigger, but it was not geographically centered. So you can see the extent of it well into Europe, and basically from the Pacific through the Black Sea and Caspian and Black Seas. The Mongol Empire basically started in 1206, and the empire extended scanned the Eurasian continent from Beijing to Moscow and to Kyiv. By 1276, Genghis Khan's grandson, Kublai Khan, had defeated the Song dynasty in China and reunited China. As I pointed out, at its greatest extent, the Mongol Empire was the largest continuous land empire ever known. You hear about the Mongol hordes. As they swept across the continent, the Mongols left a trail of death and destruction, and they destroyed major Silk Road cities. They often slaughtered those who refused to submit, but they spared those who could be of value to them, particularly artisans who would be taken back into the capital areas. But later on, under the Mongol influence, the Silk Road flourished because they established what was called the Pax Mongolica, which basically made it safe to travel all the way from west to east and vice versa. There was also religious tolerance, and many different religions, faiths, we'll see what some of those were in the future, really flourished under the patronage of the Mongols. And there were major movements of peoples, both east and west, due to conscription and then opportunities that were established in the distant regions of this single empire that was protected by the Pax Mongolica. The second guy I want to talk a little bit about is Amir Tamerlane. This is a statue of him just outside of the center of Samarkand. He was a Turco-Mongol leader in the late 14th century, born in Kesh, which is now in Uzbekistan. Basically fought battles into the Caspian Sea, the Caucasus, Russia, Mesopotamia, and India. He founded the Timurid Empire in and around modern Afghanistan, Persia, Central Asia, and he died when he was beginning a campaign into China. He did not conquer China. This shows the extent of the empire, and it goes all the way from the Black Sea on the far western end into Tashkent, Fergana Valley, Samarkand in the east, and down into India, including Delhi. I go back and forth between Emir and Amir. Basically, the one I thought I'd correct all of them could make an A, but he was considered to be one of the greatest military leaders and tacticians in history. He was also well known for extreme brutality. He followed the model of his relative Genghis Khan, basically destroyed cities, killed residents, built towers of skulls. That's a popular thing that they did back in those days, was to build towers of skulls. But he was a great patron of art and architecture, and he brought many artisans with him back to Samarkand, where magnificent buildings were constructed during this Timurid dynasty. And it was known for its revival of artistic and intellectual life in Iran, in India, and in Central Asia. He died on his way to China. They took his body back to Samarkand, and he's buried in the Amir Mausoleum, which is near the Bibi Khanam Mosque in central Samarkand. I showed those last week. I'll show it again in a minute. Inside of his casket, interestingly, I'll come back to this in closing, was an inscription that read, "Whomsoever opens my tomb shall unleash an invader more terrible than I." This is his mausoleum. You can see the beautiful Timurid architecture. If you look at on the right of that, You see that there's a cenotaph, the dark black one. That is one piece of jade, cracked. That is not his tomb. He's buried in the basement. That's a cenotaph that marks his tomb. Well, the Russians decided that they really wanted to see what he looked like and see whether he really was lame or not. And so they dug up his body. And here you see Russian scientists looking at his body. And it was a real serious error because his curse came to be. 2 days later, Hitler's troops invaded Russia. And so a power much greater than he was in fact released. And here you see the smiling art sculpture that recreated him on the basis of the skeletal remains. He was lame. He had both a damaged arm and one of his legs was knee had been screwed up by an arrow. Questions or comments? That's a lot for an hour, I realize. But eight comments, maybe. Questions? Yeah.
Did he die of natural causes from disease, or?
Yeah, he died of leukemia. Yeah. A lot of people would have liked to see him help him on his way. Yeah,
So in one of the early maps, it shows Iberia east of Armenia. How did that happen?
There are lots of names that were used more than once, and that's one of them. There's also Albania that's not in Albania today. That's a good point. Yeah. Yes?
What is the languages? What other languages spoken by the areas empire?
Well, the question is, what are the languages? Well, they all had individual languages. Sogdian was the one that most of the traders spoke, but all these people had literally hundreds of languages.
So, what is the common language spoken by?
The most common language was Sogdian. Sogdian. Yeah. Yeah, there were literally hundreds of languages. I mean, it's the same one now. Yes.
Yeah, when I was in school, we were taught that the production of silk came out of China.
It did.
I mean, it sounded like it came from the West.
Oh, no, sorry. If I get the question is, she thought silk came from China. The answer is yes, it did. What was important, that date that I gave you, was that's when it first came to Byzantium. But it was in China. We'll talk about that, I think, next week or the week after. It was Chinese, and the Chinese guarded it very carefully. And anybody who was caught trying to smuggle silk worms or out of the country was executed. There's a lot of stories about other ways, but yeah. No, it was from China. Major things that we'll talk about from China: silk, paper, gunpowder. Yes, ma'am.
But that's what I was wondering about the silk production in 17. The climate was very different, wasn't it? I mean, did they have to, did the worms eat different?
Good question. Let me just answer that quickly. The climate was not that different, and one of the arguments is that along with smuggling the eggs of silkworms, they smuggled seeds from mulberry trees. Silkworms eat one thing, that's mulberry leaves. They eat them in huge quantities, as you'll see when I talk about silk. They eat a lot of mulberry leaves, and the situation was such that they could grow mulberry trees and produce silk in the Mediterranean basin. But it started in Asia, and if you got the impression of it otherwise, it started in China. Okay, anything else? Okay, thanks. I'll see you all next week.